Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week, as we always do, with an album review, where we go through an entire album track by track, exploring each song in isolation and it's part of the larger artwork. Today we're going to be checking out a group called Dozer. I don't think I've ever heard this group before. This album is called Through the Eyes of Heathens. We have 10 tracks at 44 minutes. This came out back in 2005. Let's dive into the first one called Drawing Dead. Got that wah paddle going on. So we get two of this one of this one of this one, and even the expanded riff works off of that same idea. Lots of bass at the bottom of this. Very interesting phrasing. Sneaky little snare roll. Is this a little slower? I don't know. The 16th notes on the guitar in the quiet section feel a little slow, like 2 BPM, just a hair bit. Okay, yeah. What? This chorus is still phrased so weirdly. Oh yeah. I don't know what word I want to use here to describe the track. Part of me wants to call it wild. Part of me wants to call it weird. There's a lot in here that sits in late 90s, early 2000s alt rock. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Audio Slave as far as the guitar, bass, and drum work goes, the general tone of the instruments. I'd even say that that gritty style of vocal delivery with a little bit of, maybe even a lot of bit of emotional personality is very reminiscent of the time as well. But it does a lot to deviate from the stereotypical sounds that you can get within that area too. I don't always think that it deviates in a positive way, though. There's some wild choices in here that kind of bounced off of me. Maybe something that would make more sense on a subsequent listen, knowing what I'm in store for, but here I was just kind of left questioning what they were attempting to do and why this was in the track to begin with. But there's other sections that I think absolutely end up working well, deviations from the formula that support and embellish the track and put their own unique stamp on this style of music. This is strong iteration at some points and eclectic iteration in others. And that's what I find so interesting about it, because it's almost as if Dozer decided we gotta put our stamp on this. We have to not be like every other alt rock group out there doing this sort of crunchy hard rock sound. How do we do that? And so they kind of try a bunch of different things, and nothing, well, at least from my perspective of it, very few of it ended up on the cutting room floor. I would actually be really interested to see on this song in particular, and maybe by the time we get to the end of the album, all of the tracks, what ended up getting cut from these songs. What were licks, riffs, passages, ornamentation, melodies that were originally in these tracks, but it wasn't left in for the final version. Because I do feel like this song has a bit of that to it that needs to be cut off. And there's some really odd choices in here too that disrupt the general flow and pacing of the track. So things that, at least to me, from an editor perspective, is very obvious we need to get rid of these if we want to tighten the experience up. It does become a bit more artistic, though, with its inclusion, something that feels very Dozer, even if it isn't something that I find enjoyable. So I suppose there's always that angle as well. As usual, music has no rules, but we do kind of have sets of instruction, so to speak, of what's going to work for a general populace. And this song is interesting to me because it walks that line, but has no problem stepping outside of it every once in a while to do something a little less traditional, a little less mainstream. And I suppose some of my intrigue here, some of my interest is, why were some of these ideas added? What were they hoping to say artistically, thematically about these moments? I don't know. Let's finish the abstract talk and look at more focused ideas here. A lot of this song is based off of 3 chords. You get your first one, your home chord, twice. Then you get a passing tone into an expressive tone, back into the release, the core home. We see this on the verse riff, which is just kind of take a note, have a cool rhythm to go on it, use that same rhythm on the second note, same rhythm on the third note. But in the chorus, we actually have more of a melodic flow. We have rising and falling ideas. Now, granted, the first 2 sets of rising and falling ideas are generally within the same range and same ideas. It's the third and the fourth that move upward in energy, much like we saw a stagnancy of the first half and an escalating element in the second half of our verse riff. We've just gone from single notes to more expressive melodic riffs. And I really like this idea, to take something basic and expand upon it, to create variation on a core idea, to find the blueprint of an idea, the most, stripped down bare bones version of something, and then how do you expand from that? It allows the song to be tied together through its key tones, while also allowing each part of the song to be its own identity, while also crafting highs and lows naturally through the idea of stripping things down and then expanding upon them. It's just the cornerstone of really effective, efficient writing, and I love to see it here. They don't try to reinvent the wheel, they just try to improve upon it while also making sure that the song is carved out for good pacing. Very good writing all over the place, and I think as far as palatable mainstream rock style of music, you can't go wrong by sticking to this formula right here. So many greats, not even just in rock, but in plenty of genres, have done the same exact thing. Theme and variation is huge throughout almost all of our music history, and there's a reason for it. So I'm glad to hear the guitar riffs consistent throughout. The bass riffs are also consistent in a less exciting way. It's a lot of pedal tone on this track. We do get a bit of movement under the chorus, and the bass does get to shine a hair bit at the beginning of the bridge, but once again, it's more a shine of production more so than composition. Its volume and presence gets boosted up primarily because there's not much of a guitar at that moment. We'll get to the bridge in a second though. The drum work is great throughout. It is locked in. It gives us the backbeat. This has to be a bit heavier than dexterous. It goes along with this hard rock, stoner kind of sounds. It's supposed to feel weighty, and you're not going to get that if you have more dexterous, bouncy, syncopated ideas. So locking into downbeats is really important for this, but the drummer chooses to use non-accented syncopated ideas and the occasional flourish on some cymbals or some snare rolls in order to keep it interesting from moment to moment, but while still emphasizing core beats, to keep that weight, to keep that very steady movement forward. It is a nice, well-balanced approach to this type of drum work and absolutely flourishes within this style right here, while also finding ways to keep it interesting. It never just locks into a very straightforward, kind of tropey rock drum beat. And I guess this wraps us to the vocals, which, as I mentioned earlier, they got a little bit of raspy bite to them. They're kind of shouted. We got something close to some fry compression put in towards the end of the track. It is just very expressive. It almost has a bit of soul to it as well. But it just comes across as incredibly passionate due to the fact that almost every line in here feels like it's being yelled. This is, I think, a blessing and a curse. Part of it is that, yes, it is expressive. It is emotionally connective. When I hear this, I'm like, this dude believes everything he's saying. He's belting it out using every bit of his diaphragm and air support and just projection in order to get these words out. But it does feel like the vocalist is trying their hardest to get above the guitar work too. On the production side, I feel like the vocals are tucked into the mix just a hair bit more than I would like. They're being drowned out a little bit, and the compression on the vocals, which sounds like yelling, almost sounds as if they're trying to overcome their environment rather than simply shout within it. And it's probably something I'm going to adjust to as we listen to this album, assuming the rest of the production is similar, but it is something that stood out to me on this track. Though I do think in the chorus it works a little bit better than it did in the verse. So we have this verse and this chorus and the verse and the chorus. And to me, at least, I felt like we had been in this song for a long time. I was very surprised to look at the length, the progress bar, and we were only like 1:50 in. I don't know why. It felt like we had listened to a lot of music at this point, but we finally got a change in the music here. At the bridge, we have the drummer shifting away from the snare and cymbals to primarily toms and bass kick. We have an occasional snare for an accent point, but it isn't quite as dominant in the track as it was previously. And we have the bass guitar just creating this low-end rumble with a little bit of movement to the pitch underneath. It is a very low-end, earthy tone between the toms and the bass guitar. And then we get a guitar solo-ish thing on top of that. I say solo-ish thing because eventually we will go into more of a traditional solo. We get some really cool guitar bends in there. I feel like it brings a little bit of blues rock into the mix while still having the bite of this hard rock, stoner rock kind of guitar tone. And I love that combination right there. I think that the gritty stoner sound with blues rock ideas, especially on melodies, is phenomenal. A lot of this is the backbone to bands like Queens of the Stone Age, and it's why I find their sound so great as well. Once we get into the solo, I'm more receptive of this moment, but leading up to it it's pace breaking. I think that's the only way I can describe it. It's a bunch of non sequitur moments. It almost feels experimental in that we have a couple of notes and then nothing, and then a couple of notes, and then maybe the drum will throw in a little snare thing, and then the bass will run up a little bit, and there'll be a couple more notes. And it feels like it wants to embody this idea of building, of bringing the song down to nothing, slowly bringing things back in, but not in a slow burn style of layering it up, more so in a I'm trying to get the lawnmower going idea where you get these little humps of energy. And so you get a little burst of guitar work and a little burst of drum work here and then a little burst of bass. And you're slowly getting it working and getting this energy higher and higher and higher. And eventually it does build into a little bit of a guitar lick that takes us into the solo section. There, it kind of works. But it's also, the whole time I'm listening to it, I'm just thinking, what are they doing here? Where are they taking this? Why are we here? The song has so much drive and momentum, and we've killed all of that. And I like the idea of bringing things down to bring them back up. I'm a huge fan of contrast and dynamics. I'm just not too sure the execution here necessarily worked too well. I think there might have been a better way to do this, though we may get into the lyrics, and it speaks about something that I think I could attribute to this type of musical narration going on here. But from a purely musical standpoint, I was very lost here. And this kind of ties me into another idea on this track, which is the chorus. I was very lost the first time through this chorus, and even towards the end of the track, I had mentioned that it has a really strange pacing to it. It is 4 bars of 4 beats. We have a 16-beat phrase here. This is as standard as you can get. But after we have our 4 bars, I would expect the pattern to be repeated in some manner. It doesn't have to necessarily be an exact repeat, but generally that's how a lot of mainstream music works. And instead we have this low end kind of pick a note and make a rhythmic idea off of it, which the entire 4 bars previous to that was the melodic riffage, the expansion of the verse line where we have those key notes, but it's just the notes. Now we have some cool movement around those key tones. And it stops. It's like this cog, 2 cogs that are stuck together and they're not, they finally click, and then, they start rotating each other, however cogs work. But there's like a whole bar of like the song coming to a standstill and kind of chugging or skipping, however you want to interpret that. So this is like a 5-bar phrase here because the next bar kind of feels like it embodies a lot of bar 1 did. Well, 5 is kind of a weird number to fit into a 4-bar idea. Sorry, a 16-bar idea. 5 doesn't go into 16 very well. But then you'll notice the next set is 4. Instead of doing the 4 in a chug, now we have 3 in a chug. And it feels odd. And the way you have to end up counting it is that you have this 4-bar phrase. The next 4-bar phrase is similar to that, but bar 1 is the chugging part. It's the frictional part where the song doesn't want to keep going. And they do this over and over, where it feels like it should be the end of the phrase, but it's actually the beginning of the phrase and replaces the original start, which actually felt like a beginning. It's what makes this whole section rhythmically disjointed, what makes it difficult to follow until you've become more familiar with it. It makes beginnings feel like endings, and it also places a lack of pacing within it multiple times, a way of stopping the song, bringing it to its knees before it can get back up and start running again. I think it kind of grew on me by the end. I mean, I had heard it 7, 8 times at that point, but I'm not sure it's perfect. It's another thing where I think the execution doesn't quite follow the vision, but I can see where the vision is. It almost makes me wonder if they shouldn't have tried an odd number of bars in there. Instead of going for 4 bars of 4, maybe we should have had 5 bars of 4, 4 bars of 5. Play around with some stuff. Go for something a little less traditional, since you're aiming for something non-traditional with your phrasing anyways. But I'm sure also it's one of those things that as you get more familiar with it, it kind of locks into place. You can expect it, and it becomes less odd as it becomes more familiar. But it is one of those things that turns this song from, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of it reminds me of Audioslave, into something that's very Dozer. Something I can't say I've heard before. I don't know if I'd call it progressive, but certainly exploratory. That would be the word I want. It's fairly iterative 70% of the time, and the other 30%, it's trying new things within the basic blueprint, within that basic framework of this genre. Let me check out some lyrics for this one. We'll see what's going on. Have you ever read lyrics that are just so incredibly vague that you feel like you're maybe just missing something? Obviously, they can't be that vague. It almost sounds like it's meaningless, just words to fill space. You feel in your gut, maybe a couple lines stand out. You're like, yeah, this has to mean something. That's where I am with this track. We have 5 stanzas here. One of them's the chorus that gets sung 3 or 4 times. But I don't... Let me just read the first stanza for you. This style, both the language of it, the words used, the vocabulary of it, and its sort of vague nudging direction towards something without ever actually pointing towards it, is kind of the flavor of all of it. It says, I can't control it. You'll never notice. What you can't see will never be in the open. It's just a campaign of non-believers. They can't wait until they're facing their master. To move from I can't control it to you'll never notice that what you want is something you have to search for. I don't understand that movement there. And then to jump to it once again. Is this what he can't control? We've already established that the it is something controllable, but now it's just a campaign of non-believers that can't wait until they're facing their master. So we have a group of people who are in opposition towards something but aren't free thinkers themselves. What does this have to do with controlling something and searching for stuff off the beaten path? The second part of the opening verse says, I can't face it. You'll never know this. I am faceless and in need of an anchor. I have no identity. I need something to ground me, to root me, to build myself around. And you'll never know this about me. But also I can't face it. And what it is never expanded upon here, and it might even be something different on every single stanza. In fact, maybe the I can't control it and it's just a campaign are two different it's, though grammar would have me believe they're connected as we never reset another noun in here for that pronoun to be referencing. This is the entirety of the... Oh, let me finish that second stanza. It's a new strain of underachievers and they're waiting for us by the true disaster. Again, vaguely nudging towards something without ever actually pointing at it. It also lines up once again a singularity of the narrator and a largeness of unimportant people lining up to something larger, the non-believers wanting to face their master, and the unachievers waiting for the true disaster. There is this sense of a group of unimportant people aligning themselves with something important, and the narrator being in opposition to that, or maybe even just separate from it entirely. I don't know. I'm very lost on this. The final stanza, though, says, I will never know what it is really meant. As long as it is slow, I know I'm really spent. And I feel that idea that I'll never know what it's really meant to be. I don't think this song means anything. The sentences make sense. They follow grammar. They have verbs and nouns. They mean things. It's just the series of sentences themselves. I'm not seeing any threads that tie any of this together. It talks about a new stage of evolution. It talks about a curse on the rising. There is change. But it never takes a moment to ever say what any of this is, how to understand all of this together. It does say, though, that eventually you start to pay. Fear always stays, and then he'll never come. And I don't know. We're going to see if this is a continued thing. Maybe it's just this song that's rather vague. There's been a lot of rock music, particularly in the 90s and 2000s, that I even remember listening to on the radio, where I don't think the lyrics meant anything. So, I mean, there's always that. It would be very much of the time, of the style, to just sort of have nonsense lyrics. It's going to be a rough day for lyrical analysis, though, if that's how it's going to be. I am noticing, though, that we are moving towards shorter and shorter tracks. That one was 440 almost. The next one's going to be 320 and then a 240. We're losing like 50 seconds off of each track. We will push into a 5, and we're going to wrap this up on an 8.5 minute epic. But it seems a lot of this stuff is going to be in the 3 to 4 minute range, with a couple of shorter ones and a couple of longer ones. Let's dive into this next one called Born a Legend. All right, so you have the riff, and then you just pitch shift it down, and bring it down, and bring it down. I do like the very large drum work here, though. Something on the sides, too. interesting drum fill. Alright, so we have supporting vocals on that section. Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. I forgot to bring this up last time. The ending to Drawing Dead, it was called Drawing Dead. What does that even mean? How does that relate? Okay, anyways, the ending to Drawing Dead was actually really phenomenal. We had that scream that starts out low and rises in volume, not through physical volume change, but on the production side, fading it in, and that pulled us into the halftime feel. I forgot to bring that up. That was excellent. I love the ending to Drawing Dead. It did kind of get weird with timing, as the guitar riffs felt strange as when they were slowed down, and I think the people playing them weren't 100% in time on the slower tempo. But generally speaking, again, fantastic idea. I think this band is full of great ideas. I bring that up because the end of this song was also a faded in scream underneath the chorus, which is exactly what we got last time. I think that's an interesting pattern to see. It certainly brings up the energy at the end of the track and is a fun way to wrap things up, but it can become tedious if they choose to do it every time on an album. One of those things that works as a one-off or maybe a semi-recurring idea, but they've kicked off both the opening tracks with that ending. You know, I have this thing I like to say sometimes. When we listen to metal that does other things, and it does the other thing, maybe it's classical, maybe it's electronic, maybe it's pop, whatever. It does the other thing for a little bit of time versus the longer time. And usually once that other thing starts to develop, that's when the metal comes in and interrupts it. And, you know, I comically, facetiously like to call that ruined by the metal. I think I got a new one today, though. Burned by bridges. I think that's a fun play on words because usually it's about people burning bridges. But here I have found two bridges back to back that just haven't quite clicked with me. I don't know what it was with this one. We had a cool guitar solo come in, some nice repeating structure to it as we built the idea out of that. We have these cool tom ideas underneath, lots of energy. The bass is doing some cool stuff. And right at the point where I feel like the solo should explode, all of this energy from the toms exploding into the cymbals and the snare, the bass coming through out of this pedal tone stuff, maybe moving towards something counterpunctual. The solo itself exploding out of this pendulum swinging idea of kind of bouncing between two ideas and then moving into something expressive and melodic. That's where I expected this to go. Everything was building up into that. And instead, it kind of jarringly just thrust me back into the chorus. Part of my disappointment is that I was expecting something else, but I'm going to be completely honest, because of the bridge from the first one. As we got through that and I saw that there were only like 30 seconds left, I said to myself in my head, they're just going to bring this back to the chorus, aren't they? And so I'm a little less disappointed because I got a good read on them. But it also, I think, diminished the song quite a bit. It seems rather clear what to do here from a more iterative style, and they chose the more boring of the iterative routes to do so here. And I feel like this is the second time that a guitar solo and a bridge has some really cool ideas in it and just never gets the chance to bloom into what it needs to be. Where, interestingly, I think Drawing Dead ended up feeling a little long for me. This one was too short. I'm not saying we needed to get rid of the chorus, in the final chorus entirely, but give me another 30 seconds of that bridge. Let that solo explode and allow the solo to grow in a way, melodically, that it can transition back into the chorus, either by holding out the last couple of notes over the last chorus as it comes in, or by allowing the solo to bleed into the guitar riff so that it can naturally transition. I mean, these are both incredibly iterative ideas. Bands have been doing this for decades. It's not like I'm making anything up and being innovative here. And yet Dozer didn't do that. They went for something that feels less connected, more jarring of a transition, and kind of underwhelming, which I find to be a little bit of a letdown, because I feel like this band gets the verse chorus structure. I like the verse and the chorus on this. They're both very cool. We got some driving ideas on the chorus. It doesn't take the expansive idea that we saw on Drawing Dead. Instead, we get a different chorus idea altogether here based on different key tones and different chordal movement. But nonetheless, it's still very cool. We have one longer held out note, two shorter notes, and then a fourth longer held out note, which gives us a bit of movement in the middle, but these elongated bookends to the riff itself. This is cool because we get this stretch, squash and stretch, push and pull, whatever you want to call it, where the song itself feels like we're speeding up and then slowing down and then speeding up and slowing down. And it creates this contrast, but also this friction within the song. The drummer also has a lot of this in there as well. We saw a little bit of it in the bridge and in the verse, where they will kind of keep a steady pulse throughout. And then every once in a while, just throw in a snare roll in there, and just kind of speed up the intensity, the rhythmic cadence of it for a beat or a beat and a half, before bringing it back to the regular tempo. There's a lot in this track that feels like this push and pull, and it does, much like Drawing Dead, create synergy between the various sections of this track. Everything is set up well. The groove is here. The guitar tones still sound fantastic. The riffs are meaty and punchy. The vocals sound great. It is catchy in all of the right ways. It just can't stick the landing. They've got the verse chorus structure down. They've got the general hook and catch of it all. They just can't get past the finish line. On both of these songs, they kind of stumble back into a general feeling that they've introduced from the beginning of the track, but they kind of stumble into that bridge, find their footing a little bit, and then stumble out of it. It is a series of fumbles overall for me. And the thing is true with this track also. Getting into the bridge was kind of awkward. We had the rolling snare stuff that kind of felt like marching snare. The bass accompanied that, much like Drawing Dead, but in a very different way here, since we're focusing on this forward momentum rather than a groove. But it's still drum and bass to start, and then a guitar solo comes in on top of that. The solo ends up feeling great and has cool directionality. It just never ends up transitioning back or growing in a way that feels right. The meat of the solos on both of these tracks, fantastic. The verses and choruses, fantastic. It's just tying all of it together. It's getting that we're at like a 7 out of 10 with a couple of flaws in it. Getting to that 8 or 9 out of 10 areas, it's just it doesn't have that final splash of polish on it. And it's a little disappointing to listen to because they have so much stuff going right for them. And to see them, get up to the 70%, 80% area, you're coming up on the home stretch, then to fumble the bridge on both of these. And it's not even a full fumble. Like I said, the solos themselves are good. They just they're awkward getting into them and awkward coming out of them. And it makes me wonder if this was maybe their first album or something like that. Because I feel like this is something that experience would aid with. After you've had a couple albums under your belt, simple ideas like transitioning your music and getting through your structure, you'll start to understand how that works within your style and your varying levels of experimentation, your specific brand and mold of this genre of music. And this just seems like an awkward middle point where they understand how to make stoner rock. They understand what they want to do within that's unique and specific to them. They just haven't quite figured out how to execute on that perfectly yet. This feels like something that is an album that would showcase where a band is going, strong amounts of potential, but just not quite having the experience to pull off their vision quite yet. And they get really close too. Like, I don't want to diminish what's going on here. It's little pieces of where it falters, but it's enough to, kind of watching your favorite athlete do their thing. Maybe they're doing track and they get right up to the end and it's just a little stumble and it was a close race and the other person just passes them at the last second. You're just like, dude, you had it. So close. Next time, dude. You got it next time. And that's how I'm feeling about Dozer right here. Strong ideas in general, but it's going to take one more go, I think, to really solidify all of their work and experience and practice into something that is great, phenomenal, I think I touched on everything for that one too then. There were some cool harmonies in that. We had some extra vocal layers for texture, and there was some sort of synthy overtone over here in a couple of places. It might have been actually overtones on the guitar. I don't know. I couldn't place an instrument to it either. It just kind of appeared at times. I don't know what that was, but it was cool. I enjoyed it. Didn't detract from anything. It's just something I noticed while attentively listening to every corner of the track. It certainly adds to it though, and I like that. Let's hit some lyrics. Normally, I try to wait a little bit to get some extra context on a band, try to get halfway through an album or so before I bring in extra information that might color my experience with an album. But I had to know if English was this band's first language. Because here we have another song that honestly seems like gibberish. The sentence structure is fine. Each individual sentence is clearly stated in what it means. It's just that when you put all these sentences together, it doesn't create a very clear picture of what's trying to be said. So they are a stoner rock band from Sweden, and I have to wonder if maybe English just isn't a language they have a lot of grasp over. Maybe enough to put sentences together, but it could also be something lost in translation. I don't know. There's something going on here though. And have y'all ever seen those videos where they'll create like a little skit, right? The one I remember seeing was like two people cooking dinner, then they sit down to eat and they're having a conversation. But it's done in the general phonetic sounds of your language, but not actual words of your language. So like the rising and falling, the general speech cadence, the emphasized and stressed syllables that exist within it. All of that sounds right. It sounds, in this case, I've watched an English version of this. It sounds like English, but it's not words. None of it's making any sense. It just sonically sounds familiar. A lot of the same phonetic sounds in the correct-ish order are put together. That's what this is like. It feels like English. It is English. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It kicks off and it says, "In need of information. I've heard that you have more than what you need. So you better be tempted to give it away. You better be ready to lead the way." Okay. Okay, this is a strong start. I need to know something about something that you have information on. And this is so important that I not only need you to give it to me, but I need you to be ready to lead a charge against something. From here, though, the very next stanza, this is the same verse, says, "Deny the accusation, because you'll never have the courage to carry on. You'll never feed them with the bait, and you'll never teach them how to hate." So this person went from being an information broker of sorts, that he wants to lead some sort of group, to being someone who is on the receiving end of possibly slander, but also says that they don't have and never will have the courage to carry on, which is why they have to deny the accusation. And see, this is where it starts to get a little muddy. But then we get to the chorus, and it says, "If I find you, you will never buy the time, because the hour is getting late and you are left behind. Too late for you, so you better realize you were born a legend, but it's over now. You were destined to be something greater, but I'm not going to let that happen. And you can't buy yourself any more time. You're getting left behind." And there's animosity here. You better realize you were born the legend, but you won't ever reach that status. Is this the same you? Once again, we don't have anything else to tie that second person word to other than the information broker from the first verse. Is our narrator, do they have a positive, a neutral, a negative relationship to this person? What is their place within this story? I don't know. The next verse, interestingly, flips it, though. The "in need of information" stanza comes second. The first stanza says, "This constant degradation, we see it in the corner of your eyes. Makes me wonder why you judge me by my size. Makes me wonder why you look so surprised." That's the Yoda line, right? Judge me by my size. Um, I guess it doesn't have to be that, but it's so rare for me to ever hear someone say that phrase in that order. There's so many more natural ways to suggest that someone is judging you by your stature than to say, "Judge me by my size." And then it says, "I'm in need of information, and I need more than you can give. So what you give me is vital, but what you give me is sick." Again, I get the gist of it. You're giving me stuff that's important, but maybe it's possible you're giving me something that might poison my, group of information. Maybe you're going to give me some false information. Again, there's this untrustworthiness here that kind of lines up with the feeling that this other person is judging them. There's an altercation, a tension between the two. I don't, I really don't. I'm really interested in seeing what some of y'all's interpretations of these lyrics will be in the comments. If any of you decide to head on over to genius.com and search up this album's lyrics, maybe it'll make sense to you. I'm still on the hypothesis that there's a language barrier thing here. either something lost in translation from Swedish to English, or maybe just not that strong of a grasp of the language. And instead of trying to translate Swedish ideas, this is just, their English ideas that they've come up with. Again, the structure, the grammar, all that's solid from line to line. It's just, it never quite comes together for me. It feels like I'm missing something. And there's what you give me is vital, but what you give me is sick. Sick seems like a strange word to put there. And it doesn't necessarily rhyme with anything else. There's quite a few stanzas in here that go for an A-B rhyme scheme. That one doesn't. So it's not like sick was chosen for a rhyming pattern. It feels like something that probably would have made sense in Swedish, but something got lost in translation and we ended up with a literal translation that doesn't quite make sense in English. And I think that's probably what's going on with a lot of this. But there's always the third option too. It's just gibberish, which, like I said, a lot of music of this time kind of went in that direction also. All right, next up is the shortest track on the album, called From Fire Fell. Dig in the alliteration. Okay. Okay, solid track there. No bridge. Well, a bit of an atmospheric bridge, as we had that just escalating and then eventually descending. It sounded synthy to me. I didn't really hear too much of an initial attack on it. It's just kind of a wide sound that sits above everything else. It's a cool moment. We got the driving drums and guitar underneath it, the bass too. And it cleanly moves out of the chorus and cleanly moves back into the chorus. But I think a lot of that is because it's based around a lot of the same composition of it. Really, it's our opening riff with this expanded, again, I don't know, a synth maybe, the guitars, I don't know, something expanded on top of it. So we've already had, well, I've actually showcased multiple times that they do a great job with intro, verses, and choruses and moving between those. So basically just making a bridge that's your intro all over again. It's just connecting your verses and choruses and intros. So they've shown that they're really good at that, and this track, I think, continues to show that. I do like the expansion from the original introduction, but yeah, it ends up being a very smooth track to listen to for the most part. Trying to I want to start with more positive before I get into some stuff that I thought is a little awkward, but I mean, I already touched on it. It's a driving song. It's all well done. The guitar riff is solid. It sounds great. We did have some cool movement from a build up into that perceived double time feel at the end of the track. It's just a solid song from start to finish. I have two odd the guitar riff. There's a little bend in there. About 3/4 through, it's a very legato shift. And I don't know if it's a bend. I don't know if it's a hammer on. It can't be a hammer on into a pull off because that would require a little bit more extra attack to it. It's got to be a little bend, but it's so tiny. You barely even notice it during the isolated guitar in the intro. And once the drums and bass come in, it's impossible to hear it at all. It's an interesting choice. It adds complexity to the line, but it's almost an imperceptible complexity. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then there's the vocal delay on the verse, which just I feel like it is coming in on the third group of a triplet, and it's rhythmically out of time with everything. It feels awkward and it muddies up on some of the larger vocal hits. It muddies up the instrumentation going along with it. So it's rhythmically awkward most of the time, and one time per phrase, it ends up muddying things. It's an odd choice for me. I like the idea of doing this massive reverb delayed vocal part. I think this is a cornerstone to a lot of psychedelic music, and I've heard stoner bands do it too. It's something that absolutely can be done in this sound, and it sounds very cool when it's done well. They just chose for the delay to be at a very awkward point rhythmically, and production wise, it doesn't click too well. I don't know what went behind that decision. It's another thing where I feel like they're trying to put their own spin on it, and I appreciate the want to be innovative, to try something new, to experiment. It just kind of falters, doesn't stick the landing very well. I did forget about this though. I wish I had brought this up earlier because I wanted to start with the positive stuff. The clean vocals in here are very cool. I like them. They fit well as a contrast to the gritty yelling that we have throughout most of this. And the falsetto sounds great. It's clear. It's got a good amount of body to it. It all comes together rather nicely. I like the way that the melody plays alongside the rhythmic cadence of the guitar riff. The way that the guitars, the drums, and the vocals all play off of each other in the chorus is infectious. I can listen to this part all day. It sounds great. I hope we see more of that because I do love the gritty yelling. I like this. This is the kind of sound I grew up on. I have a lot of nostalgia for this kind of sound in general, overall, but certainly that vocal style. But the contrast is great. And to go back and forth on that between the verse and the chorus is very cool. But it's also a very straightforward track, and it's the shortest one. I don't really have a lot to add to this one. It gave me something cool, gave me some questionable choices. This seems like Dozer in a nutshell right here. Let's hit some lyrics. These lyrics are actually coherent. To a point, we'll get to that. But it talks about those who are most susceptible to being controlled, that they will be controlled and they will ultimately die because of it, especially when people who have more power but maybe aren't those in control decide to turn a blind eye, refuse to speak out against the the terrible control of this lower class. The words that's specifically used in here is slave. It says slaves go hand in hand to suicide when the silence speaks the loudest. Have you never asked the question, why? Maybe silence is the blind man's eye. It says you'll get beaten down and never will you rise, and you can cry, or you could never cry and just let it pour inside. That part got a little weird. But the end of the song is a repetition of the phrase or of the word slave, just screamed over and over. And it talks about slaves being controlled, both to be used for their, whatever, their labor, but also to be killed. It says they go hand in hand to suicide, which I think is an interesting word there. Might just be one of those cases where the translation's a little rough. But it does say that this happens when no one speaks out about it. Now, I did mention that it is mostly coherent. We have the first two lines of the track, Christ, you will know my name when you begin to die. Blood, you will taste the blood coming from your mouth. And this puts a very interesting spin on it, because the rest of this track could be read from the perspective of an outsider viewing this situation. A little bit of condemnation for it. If y'all had just spoken out, you could have protected these people, but also it's a bit more of a factual description of what is going on. People are being beaten down, they're killed, no one else is saying or doing anything about it. It's just very matter-of-factly stating the situation. But the beginning of it, those first two lines feel personal. They also feel like they're coming from the perspective of the aggressor, which drastically changes the perspective on this. It doesn't seem so much about simply stating what's going on, but relishing in it. I watch the slaves go hand in hand to silence. No one asks about it. Everyone turns a blind eye, and I will beat them down. They will never rise. You could cry, or you couldn't cry and keep it all inside. You're just a slave. And that's very different. That's an exceptionally different take on the track. I don't know which one is intended. This is an interesting thing. The other tracks, I've just been confused about what they're trying to say. This one, I'm confused about what it's trying to say. Does that make sense? What its perspective is, what its angle is on this topic. The topic, for once, is actually clear, but I'm not sure its angle on it. I'm not sure its perspective on it. It seems to embody a neutrality, a condonement, and a condemnation all simultaneously, which is honestly kind of bonkers. It takes massive levels of subversive writing in order to create something like this. And yet they seem to have stumbled upon this lack of perspective, or maybe a totality of perspective. I don't know. I'm kind of impressed, but I'm also, what's going on here? Let's just move on, I suppose. The next one's called Until Man Exists No More. This one has a featured artist on it, Troy Sanders. I guess I'll have to look that one up later. This is also the longest track on the album that isn't the almost 9-minute epic at the end. This one's a little over 5. Certainly sits at the higher range of their standard medium length. Let's dive into it, see what's going on. So a solid 3 here. So after 3 incredibly driven songs, we've brought the energy way down on this one, shifting away for the first time from 4/4 to 3/4, and focusing on a slower, heavier pace throughout. That must be Troy. I don't think that's the vocalist we've heard this whole time. Oh, fun bass line. All right. Like I had mentioned earlier, this track moves away from the driving energy that we've seen on the previous 3 and focuses on something a bit slower. This is an attempt to bring the energy down on the album and to create some general pacing throughout. We end up using a 3/4 tempo a 3/4 time signature with a slower tempo and a reduction of pretty much everything in the verse. It kind of brings the energy down to the bare minimum, some light drumming, a little bit of bass, and the vocals with a heavy delay and reverb once again, and the reverb still is just, it's a rhythmically odd choice. You can set up the reverb the delay to repeat your voice or whatever you're delaying at kind of whatever interval you want. And the one here just isn't matching the rhythmic cadence of the main line, so it feels disjointed. I don't know. They've done it twice. It's probably their shtick. I'm not a fan of it, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Just not my cup. But we bring the energy down, we bring the layers down, we bring the intensity down. It is a quiet verse. And then the chorus ramps the energy back up. The guitars are huge, the bass is huge, the drums are big. We got a lot of snare fills in there too, and a lot of drum fills in general. I feel like, I don't know, every other bar was a drum fill the first time through that chorus. But it's slow. It takes its time getting through this. This feels weighty in a way that the others haven't. They've been heavy, but brisk. There's been a speed through them, but this one is so heavy that it weighs the song down. It is a crushing weight. Certainly capturing many of the same sonic qualities of the previous tracks, but this time focusing on how it wants to distinguish itself and feel different. Still heavy and weighty, but crushing this time. The tempo helps feed into that guitar tone and general atmosphere that they're building. Also, dude, the peaks on this are fantastic. A lot of this album's just been full volume all the way through. A couple of dips a little lower, but this one was a pretty big difference between the verse and the chorus, and I quite enjoyed that. We also had the outro, which had two cool things in it. We have a new vocal style. I'm assuming that's going to be Troy Sanders. It's a very gruff, compressed clean. There's definitely some pitch stuff going on in there. I think there is some traditional vocal cord element in there, but it is gruff. It's gritty. It's got bite. There's compression in it. It adds a lot of energy, but also a lot of weight. This song feels like it's heavy, and this vocal style definitely leans into that, adding another low-end rumble to a style that already focuses a lot on low-end rumble, compression, and distortion. I think that works as a peak to this track to really focus on the overall, unwieldy elements of this track, that it just feels larger than life in a way that the others haven't. The vocals at the end certainly lean into that, but it also just captures this feeling. I don't think that this vocal style would have worked well on the faster tracks with this atmosphere. That's not to say it would have been bad. I don't think that's true, but I think that at this moment, it really gels well with the vision. And this is a place where the execution absolutely lands. But the other thing at the end is a sick bass line, dude. I kind of wish we saw this bass elsewhere. Maybe this is something they've been saving. The back half of this album is going to have some cool bass licks on it. But you know, a lot of the bassline stuff here has been textured and rhythmic, not so much pitch-wise. Kind of stick with a tone, a lot of pedal tone stuff going on with the bass. Sometimes we'll get a little bit of movement hovering around a home tone, but that's about it. But here we had this rising and falling arpeggio. It's a walking bass line throughout the end of this track, and it's so groovy. It sits so well with this. I'm glad to hear the bass doing something on the album other than just filling out the low end, which, if you're new to this channel, this isn't really a jab too much at Dozer. A lot of rock music does this, sort of a jab at the genre in general, and I pine for the older days when the bass, you got to do stuff in rock tracks. Give me that blues rock bass guitar stuff back. That stuff was classic. But anyways, I dig it. I think the end of this track is cool. And it's all very cohesive, too. We don't really have a bridge as much as we have a verse, chorus, outro. And they just make all that work together. This band shouldn't be doing bridges right now. Stop building bridges, start building roads. That's definitely where you all excel. We also have to talk about the bookends to this track, though. This is really not a 5-minute song. It's more like a 4-minute track. Puts it on par with most of the others, because the first minute and a half, minute-ish, is just noise. I'm not even sure what the noise is. It reminded me of construction area. Maybe not so much of the banging and clanging, but circular saws grinding into things. That's what I kind of got out of it. I didn't get anything narrative out of it. I didn't really see how it fit against everything else. It certainly was there. It was an intro. And it was nice to kind of break up away from their normal sound too. I mean, we get back into this track and it's certainly stoner rock. So having a little bit of deviation to rest the ears is really nice. But from an artistic perspective, I'd really like to know what their intentions were with it, kind of see why they thought that it needed to be in there. I'm not a super big fan on ambient moments anyways. It really needs to serve some sort of larger narrative purpose for me to grasp what it's doing. But I mean, that's what it is. It's ambient. There's no melody, there's no harmony, very, very little rhythm. There is a pulse if you want to feel it, but we don't really get that until the drums come in and really lay down that 3/4 sound. So it sort of just is. It's sonic texturing for a solid minute. And then we have a somber outro at the end that I thought was going to transition into the next track, but ultimately it didn't. And so we had like 15 seconds of this somber guitar line that I'm hoping the lyrics explain all of this. How does the intro connect to the meat of this track, connect to the outro? I feel like that's where I'm at on a lot of this. When they're in their element, when they're making stoner rock, everything makes sense and they're killing it. When they decide to step just a little bit outside of that circle, they leave me bewildered more often than impressed or engaged. It's not a bad thing, but it's certainly making for a tough first time listen when I don't grasp their intent. Let's check out some lyrics. The first stanza. This might make me strong. I'll grow weak in the end. Whatever that means. Determined to wear me down, they cannot wait to begin. I'm bound to bagged and then planted again. Oh no. I have no idea what bound to bagged is. Bound could mean tied physically, like a bag being tied. But bound typically means in a less literal sense to be tied to something. Fates being bound and intertwined kind of idea. That you are connected to something. Then it says I'm bound to bagged. And I don't think I've ever heard this phrase used of being bound to a verb. It feels weird to even say it. Bound to bagged and then planted again. I have said this phrase probably 24 times in the last 5 minutes trying to figure out what's supposed to be going on here, and I don't know. That one goes right over my head. But there is an element of growth. To be planted again means a chance at life or a chance at growth. There's regrowth, rebirth possibly in here. It says that they're determined to wear me down and they can't wait to begin. So they can't wait to start wearing you down. So then you're planted again so you can grow. And that's going to make you strong, but you'll be weak in the end. It says, why behave in civil ways? 'Cause so much at stake and you still can break. And the first 3 lines there make it feel anthemic. Why are you behaving? There is so much at stake. You need to fight for what's right. Who cares about civility when life, society, whatever is being fought for? Again, kind of vague here, but something really big is at stake. Civility is off the table now. You gotta go all the way. He says, and you can still break. That sounds negative. I'm no longer it doesn't feel so anthemic anymore. My enthusiasm has been cut down. Like, yeah, dude, we can do this. Wait, you're saying I can still be broken? I don't feel so invincible anymore. Then it says, tide nor time tarrieth no man. The battle is won, but we have lost the war. Beyond the shadows I crawl underneath the stench of dying men. Okay, so the battle's lost and you're behind enemy lines trying to... Sorry, the battle was won. The war was lost and you're trying to extend it? Then it says, from the eternal sea that he rises, creating armies on either shore, turning man against his brother till man exists no more. Okay. Okay, this creates a bit of a thesis here. We have the idea that humanity will cease to exist one day because we have no idea how to be peaceful with each other. We are angry and upset and willing to be violent against our neighbor every single time, all throughout history. We will eventually wipe our own species out. I get that. But what's this about something rising from the eternal sea and creating armies and then turning man against his brother? There's a lot of stories that can go in this direction of mind control, evil will. But I think the idea of man turning against his brother, the specific language of this, it puts me in the mind of Christian lore, of Satan telling people to attack themselves or attack their neighbors. Now, I don't think that's necessarily what this is going for, to bring a religious angle in, but something rising from the sea with mind control powers. None of these tracks have really gone into a less realistic direction, a more supernatural one. I want to read it as a metaphor, but a metaphor for what? I don't know. And how does this relate to the war being lost and him crawling beneath the bodies of the dead in order to... What exactly? His goals aren't, the narrator's goals aren't really laid out much here. What does this have to do with being planted to grow strong again? I'm lost once again. And it doesn't give me any extra information to understand the intro. Although the outro makes sense. I'd mentioned we got towards a somber outro, and the idea that humanity will wipe itself out is very somber. That's not a happy thought right there. So 1 out of 4. I found a way to tie the lyrics to the music in some fashion. All right. Next up, we have Days of Future Past. I don't know why I feel like that title needs an ambiance to it, but it does. You can't just say, hey, we're listening to Days of Future Past. Like, nah, Days of Future Past. You need that to it. Let's dive into this one. It's a bit on the shorter side, see what's going on.
I will try to find my freedom. I am cursed with golden shades.
So we have 3 chords, 4 chords.
And the walls are getting thinner.
3 the first time around, 4 the second time around. A little bit of a drop there.
I still believe there's something wrong.
Yeah, the growth of that from the compressed into the expanded.
Ask the questions about my grave. Hope the end will make you wiser. Tell me where was God today? I still believe there's something wrong with getting older. 'Cause it can get much worse. What are the choices? Should I have made it here first? There's no excuses. All the awareness of the scale doesn't matter. If I was lying down still.
All right, this is going to be a short section. I think this is their most straightforward track this entire time. Half of this song is just a guitar rising 3 notes, rising 3 notes, and coming down a half step, and then starting that cycle of 3 notes to 4 notes over and over and over with very quiet, compressed, muffled vocals off on the side. The other half is a bombastic, large chorus with the guitars, the bass, and the drums all locked into one basic constant eighth note driven idea with some slight movements in the notes in order to showcase harmonic movement, but not necessarily bringing in melody to counter what the vocals are doing. The vocals are mostly holding out these longer notes. It's an incredibly straightforward track, bouncing just back and forth between those two ideas, between giving us a really big outro, using parts of the chorus, slightly expanding on them for the guitars, and the vocals, instead of giving us words, is just ohs and ahs and woes, holding those out instead. It is, in essence, A, B, A, B, B variation. And yeah, it's not a bad song. It does feel very thin compared to the rest, though. I found that the drumming wasn't quite as expressive here. The bass work wasn't as cool as the end of the last track, which I need to look up Troy. I meant to do that during the lyric break, and I forgot. But the bass work isn't as cool as the end of the last track, and the guitar rhythms, the guitar melodies are less complex, mostly focusing on harmonic information throughout this one. I don't really have any complaints about it, but it's kind of a double-edged sword. My complaints about the first two tracks were that they were trying new things, and while they weren't exactly succeeding, it was still nice to see them trying. These last three songs, though, have been more straightforward. The intro to Until Man Exists No More aside, as that was a huge deviation from their sound, they've kind of locked into a more traditional sound overall, and while it is, I think, more polished and well put together, it's also less interesting. This is an album that, at least so far, we are halfway through it, I would not mind listening to once. I think it's a solid stoner rock album, good groove, strong power, the atmosphere and textures are great, the riffs are good enough. But there's very little here that would make me want to give it a second listen. Everything that I was talking about at the beginning that gave it the Dozer feel has kind of been removed, and it's just another stoner rock band. And that's not bad, but me personally, it gives me very little to want to come back to. And so I don't really have a lot to add to this track. It's straightforward. It gets the job done. It's very similar to the past couple of tracks. And the one thing that did stand out to me is the vocals. Let's talk about the vocals, because that was actually a cool moment. I do want to give them props for that. Starting off on the right, opposite of our guitar, rather compressed and muffled down. And then at the end of the verse, kind of comes into focus, rises in volume, splits out, and creates this stereo sound. It is a very cool contrast and dynamic writing on a lot of different parameters. It's volume, it's compression, it's lo-fi filter, or maybe high filter, high pass, one of those pass filters that makes it feel muffled and compressed down. But we also have a movement of panning from one side to the other, and also a splitting of the panning where it starts as a singular voice and ends up getting a wider stereo feel to it by the end. There's a lot of elements that go into that transition, and it sounds very cool. Unfortunately, once the chorus hits the dual stereo imaging thing and the extra reverb, once again, kind of muddy things up. I feel like the vocals are tough to hear what they're saying, where that really hasn't been a problem in the past. This could also be an artistic direction, though. Maybe the muddiness of the tone is a way of understanding what they're saying. Maybe they're feeling muffled in their words or something like that. That they got free of being compressed and tied down over here, but that doesn't mean that they're completely free of everything. You know, there's certainly artistic ways to interpret it, but as far as a pure sonic perspective, yeah, I kind of prefer the compressed side better, because at least that felt balanced within the mix, whereas the chorus, it doesn't. There's a little too much of whatever's going on there. Always with Dozer, you know, a little give and take. Everything's a double-edged sword, and honestly, like I said before, I appreciate them trying and doing new things. Let's hit some lyrics on this one. All right. Troy Sanders is the bassist and one of the vocalists for Mastodon, which is a crazy collaboration there. That does explain the vocals at the end of that track, though, and maybe even explains the expanded bass work we saw on track 4 that we haven't seen anywhere else, track 5 included. So that's pretty cool. As for the lyrics for Days of Future Past, though, see, it doesn't sound right. Days of Future Past. Once again, I don't know. I think I'm going to spend less and less time on lyrics on these last 5 tracks, simply because if it doesn't make sense, there's no point in just trying to wade through my lack of understanding of them. The first stanza, though, talks about being trapped. It says that he wants to try to buy his freedom, but he's cursed with gold chains and the walls are getting thinner. This would imply that freedom's actually easy. I mean, gold chains means that you what's keeping you captive is actually wealth, and the walls being thinner means they'll be easier to break down with each passing day. And then it says, will I survive these phantom pains? That's got to be metaphorical, because it's not a literal phantom pain. I don't know. He says, I can't believe there's something wrong. Sorry, I still believe there's something wrong, and it's getting hopeless because it can't get much worse. What other choice should I have made here first? Are we all just a waste of skin? Does it matter if I would lie down still? So what's the purpose of all this? Does anything change if I commit to inaction? Then it says, put the gun against my head, ask the question by the grave, hope the end will make you wiser, tell me where was God today? I don't know. I'm honestly considering just not doing the lyrical bits at all moving forward, but I do glimmer themes, if nothing else, through these last couple. It's kind of worth still exploring, even if consistently I haven't had much to add to the lyrical dissections at all. This next one is called Omega Glory. Let's dive in. A lot of hanging into this space. Variation on this. The riff is the same, but everything's quieter, thinner, and the falsetto. This is just a crazy section, so much energy. All right. It's going to be another quick analysis here since a lot of this track is verse chorus, though we do have the bridge to talk about. This is fun. A lot of this track is about hanging on to this energy here and then contrasting it. So we have this dun 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 dun. So a lot of this like building energy. You can feel like the water start to simmer here. And then to contrast this within the same riff, we have that dun 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 dun. That is a very cool contrast because you have the simmering, then the explosion, then the simmering, then the explosion. Interestingly, that explosion becomes the only riff in the chorus, which I'm kind of 50-50 on. I think it works really well as a situational idea, something that you come back to every once in a while, but not something that is the entire idea. It is a very busy idea. It has a lot of movement to it, and when you just playing it over and over and over, and then you have all of the tom and the snare work going on under it, it becomes an incredibly busy chorus. It's not bad, but I think a little bit of production clarity could have really helped that section. As it stands, it's a little muddy, and I think it's just because there's so much going on, but it's also, I think, the charm of this track. This is the most complex writing we've seen, and a little bit is because of the constant guitar movement, but also the drummer is going bonkers. What we see in this chorus is kind of a little microcosm of the drummer's contribution to this entire track. The drummer is all over the place. The entirety of the bridge is the drummer constantly throwing out a drum fill every other bar. And a lot of these drum fills are just snares, starting low, crescendoing loud, coming back down, moving over to the tom, come back to the snare, crescendo loud, bring it back down, come over to the tom, do some bass kick stuff, come back to the snare, bring it up like it is. He's just constantly moving. It isn't, I would say, visually impressive. This isn't your drummer hitting every single part of the kit, like putting on a concert and doing the drum solo section of the entire show. But there is a lot of movement going on in here nonetheless, despite it primarily being the two toms and the snare. This idea of consistent movement is present everywhere. The drummer keeps the beat, but is consistently showing off. Parts of it I don't think always work. It does feel a bit showy-offy at times. But I do think that the consistent energy gives this song a momentum that none of the others do. There's an urgency to this track that isn't present elsewhere in this album. It all comes down to the drummer, and I think it's what gives the chorus a lot of its oomph. We have this escalating pitch in the guitar. There is intensity from that. The drummer's letting you know that we are going forward. There is no stopping. It is just continuous. This feels intense. It does get a bit muddy. Production could clear that up, but I think compositionally this is solid. It is really interesting to listen to the drums do this after, 5 tracks or so of lock into a beat with some light embellishment and then occasionally throw in some snare rolls. I like it. The vocals are very thin here though. In parts, particularly the chorus, there's so much going on there. But we also have vocal harmonies here, which is something we haven't really heard too much of on this album. I don't know if it's multiple vocalists or just backing track done by the vocalist, but there's harmonies. We have stacks of different notes from the vocals. They're placed out to the side against the center, so we have spatial vocal work going on. It's nice. I'm enjoying that variety, and I think that it helps expand some of these ideas out, especially when there's so much sound coming from the drums. The extra vocal work allows the vocals, because they're not doing their yelly, gritty, hard rock thing right here. They're kind of a bit backed off, a little nasally, a bit higher in pitch too. It allows it to bring in some width to it that it sorely needs to contend with the rest of the instrumentation. But what I find really interesting is that in the solo section for the guitar, it mimics this. The guitar is quiet and thin. It's kind of up here, a little center right or center left, and it's just pew, 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 pew. Just these very small ideas, then a lot of a bit of space to go after it, then another idea, but it's just very light sounds. I don't know. It's interesting. I don't think it ended up working. Again, sonically, there could be artistic or thematic reasoning behind it, but sonically, for my tastes, I didn't get it. I don't understand it. I think that this was a perfect place for the instrument to play something other than a couple of disparate groupings of notes. And the section itself needed something of power, of presence, and it didn't have that either. Immediately, my first thought was, where's the spotlight here? And then I realized the guitar is soloing over here and I can't hear it, and it's not really making a lot of sense. And it's like a little shy trumpet player in the corner on their solo section. Maybe this is the first time they've ever had to improvise in front of an audience, and it's just a little tiny and they're like trying to hide physically. That's what the guitar feels like. It doesn't feel confident. And again, that could be the purpose. It just doesn't match the rest of what this song is doing. And it's called Omega Glory. Both of those words feel big. Why do we have this shy little guitar in here? Oh, geez. I'm going to look at the lyrics. I'll take it from there. I was going to just say it didn't make sense. Let's move on. But I think this track is actually taking the cake for the wildest lyrics yet. Let me just read the first stanza for you. Try to share your sparkle with me. Try it all alone. Maybe we will come and visit if you've got a clone. 'Cause it's long overdue if you get it made. 'Cause it's warm in the sun until you get the shade. That is one of the most nonsensical four-line stanzas I think I have ever read in my life, and we've checked out Gong. Not a single one of these. Also, I want to read the chorus. I don't say this to poke fun of it. I know I'm giggling alongside it. But you know, the comedy is that I don't understand it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have something to say, simply that I'm not receptive to its message. That could be on it, could be the lyrics' fault, but it could also be my fault. I might just be running into a skill issue here. The chorus states, you want the rest of me inside, taking the whole acclaim. You want to know where I've gone, maybe just fell. It's shame. You want to feel it standing tall, take a modest bite. When you can feel I cease to fall, maybe you'll see the light. It's interesting because I had a lot of trouble with the first two tracks, but tracks 3, 4, and 5, I was picking up on ideas. I thought maybe I was just getting more receptive to the way they were delivering concepts through language. And then they hit me with this, and I'm back to square one, where I'm just staring at sentences, trying to unlock meaning in these series of words. Next track is called Blood Undone. Let's kick it. Wow. All left. I think there has to be a dot there. And that implies there's just nothing on the other side. The drummer's going off again. key notes, and then we have some movement between them. I see what you're doing. I like it. I really like the stereo on the vocals here. Especially since there's so much going on here with the guitars, the bass, the drums, it pulls the space out to the side. Ooh. That's how you do a solo. Yes. Moved into it nicely from the riff, laid it down excellently, moved out of it into the riff. Sure, why not? I saw it was coming to a close. We had like 2 seconds left, and I told myself this is going into the next track or it's just ending. Run into a wall, immediate stop, ending. And even half expecting that that's what they were going to do, it still caught me off guard. I will say though, they write incredibly catchy ideas. I had the lyrics pulled up on this when I was following through with the chorus on the last time through. I don't know, but you know what? It sounds great. Okay, and I think this is something that I've been missing this entire time, much like Gong, who chooses words based on their syllabic value. How well do these syllables flow in order as as they're said? And also, how well do they sound to the ears when placed in this order? It actually doesn't care very much about the intrinsic linguistic value of these words in this sentence. It only needs to sound good. It needs to support the music, not the poetry. And maybe that's what I'm missing here, because as I'm reading the chorus that last time through, I'm like, this is nonsense. But you know what? It is fantastic. It sounds great. This is the kind of song that, if it's on a radio, you hear it dozens, 50, 100 times, and it gets to the point where it's a very comfortable song to listen to. You sing along with it, but you never really think about what you're saying. And when you do, you're like, what does that even mean? I know these words. I've sung these words. I've never thought about what they actually mean. And it's because it doesn't really matter, right? And I think that's what's going on here, because I guarantee you this chorus is going to be stuck in my head all weekend. And I had mentioned earlier that this would be an album that I don't think I would come back to. Blood Undone might be a track I play a couple more times this weekend, trying to get this earworm out of my head, because that chorus is so freaking good. And coming out of that first chorus into the guitar solo, leaving that guitar solo into the verse, exceptional. Is it iterative? Is it standard? Yeah, dude, there wasn't anything there that was innovative and blew my mind, but they did it to such a level, dude. The energy going into the solo captivating that energy and turning it into this electric solo, this melody, and then passing it back to the band to move into the verse. And it's just, dude, it was so good. And of course the choruses, dude, the chorus has so much energy. The guitars are going wild. The drummer's got so much snare roll going on in here. The bass is just filling out this low end, this meaty chunkiness on the bottom. And you got the vocals spread out to the sides, the only room they have left in the mix to exist, with all the instruments like filling this middle section here. And so they get split, and then it's just a catchy melody on top of all of this chaos, and it's just controlled in a way and manipulated to be infectious. Is this what I've been missing this whole time? Have I been overanalyzing this album, or is this really the first track that's clicked for me? I've mentioned in the past that they're solid. I've enjoyed what they've thrown down. I've said that they've had solid verses and choruses throughout, but I think this is the first time everything just clicks. I don't really have much of an issue with this track, and it doesn't even try to do an odd ending or anything like that. It's the end of the chorus. Let's finish the song up. It's just done. I do have one criticism, of course. I think body language is probably readable at this point. What was that bridge? The song just kind of comes to a standstill. They work with this halftime triplet feel. It really feels like it's trying to build into something or build down into something. There's a temporal movement here, and it never really quite gets its legs under itself. It's just kind of, in cartoons, when they're just like old cartoons, their legs are spinning, they're trying to run, but they're just running in place. Scooby-Doo style, where they're scared. That's what this feels like. It's ready to go somewhere. It's got the energy to go somewhere. It just never quite gets there. And then they're like, scrap that idea. Back to the chorus. And the chorus is sick. I'm glad they got back to it, but it would have been cool to build into it or something. I don't know. It was awkward. But again, I'll give them credit. They keep trying Dozer things. And sometimes it pays off. More often than not, I think it doesn't. But at the end of the day, it helps stand out from other bands making similar sounds. Little things like that. I don't know. Let me look at the rest of the lyrics, see what's going on there. All right. I don't know about the lyrics. I have something about the lyrics as a whole, though, that I'm interested in looking at. We might only have 2 more analysis segments. Both of the next tracks are just barely 3 minutes in length, and if they're like the shorter tracks we saw previously, like Born a Legend and From Fire Fell, I may just run them back to back and talk about them all as a whole, since I don't think I'm going to have a lot to speak about on them individually. And then we have our final track, the 8.5-minute one. So I think this is a good time to bring up a concept I've noticed showing in the lyrics frequently. There is a you and an I. Almost all of these tracks are you do this, you do that, I do this, I do that. And I'm curious about why this is. Because it's, yes, this is kind of common. We can see this in lots of artists' work. But I think there's a very specific part of this that uses the words I and you. We don't really get a she or a he or anything like that. We don't get a them. It is always specifically two people, the narrator and the other. The other is amorphous. It is not descriptive. It is simply just another person that seems to at times represent an opposition of ideas, at times represent a supporter of ideas. Very rarely do they represent anything other than that. Sometimes within the same track, this other you will be both of those simultaneously or subsequently. I don't know if this is a limitation of the language or if this is specifically what they wanted this album to be about. Small scale ideas that can vaguely point and gesture towards larger concepts. And this song, though, once again goes in that direction. Someone called and you're the servant. Someone called, though not your name. Your legs are numb, but you're still standing. Your brain is dumb, but it's still clear. And if you're tied up, I'm still walking. I'm really in, though. It's too weird. Next up, we have the roof, the river, the revolver. I don't know. We'll find out in a second. It's the title's too long. I have a nice ellipsis after that's the third the. So let's kick it, see what's going on with this one. It is Revolver. Yeah. This one's a bit darker than most of the tracks have been, harmonically speaking. Talk about though, these choruses are so good. That's so good.
You're down and you know it. You're down and you know it.
Kind of odd rhythms here. Yeah, okay. Ah, dead. Okay, I'm going to take a second to pause here. Not a lot of depth I want to get into on this one. We got that screaming in there, which is pretty cool. Honestly, I like the layering on it at the end. The chorus is so freaking catchy, dude. Ah, man, I might have to re-listen to this like in a super casual setting, lights off, camera off, just kind of take it in on my own, just turn the brain off and absorb it. I think I may end up coming around to this album. I mean, there's a chance that Blood Undone and Revolver are outliers. There's a chance of that. And do both of these tracks. Yeah. I could probably listen to these a few times and just enjoy that chorus. The ending of this one's solid too. It's also very focused. There is one bit of it though. This is the Dozer effect. The one thing where they went a bit outside the norm and did something that's cool, not great execution, super. The chorus has a really bizarre polyrhythmic thing going on. The drums are laying down a pretty standard backbeat with their own syncopation against it. We have a very consistent beat in this track. You feel it. There is syncopation against that though, and it's what creates a little bit of that bluesy groove that's going on in this track. Because the guitars have a nice bounce to it, bringing in swung eighth notes, which is pretty cool. The thing is, though, is that the swung eighth notes on the guitar is emphasizing different syncopated hits than the syncopated accents on the drums. And so they kind of lock into this cool, like trading off emphasis. Like you'll get the guitar syncopation in, and then they'll lock in together, and then the drum syncopation. But like 60% into the pattern, it's real muddy. The guitars and the drums are both accenting different parts of different beats simultaneously, and it's a rhythmic mess for a brief moment, and then it all like clears up and you're back to sunshine. Everything is clear. You can hear all the different syncopations. They're taking their time, making space for each other. And then 60% into this again, it's a moment of like really cluttered mess. And I appreciate this, having this multi-layered rhythmic approach to it. It is neat. It is cool. The vision is excellent. The execution needs some work. But again, I appreciate it. I think it's pretty cool that they keep trying to do this. And you know what? I'm going to call these Dozer moments. And this album is full of them. It's what's given me so much to talk about, both in like a negative and positive light. It does show a lot of promise though. I would love to check out maybe a whole album, but even just specific tracks of the follow-up album to this, and kind of see what they're doing on that one. If they took some of the lessons from this album and really honed in on the Dozer moments and made them both interesting and executed well. I think that'd be pretty cool. Let me see the lyrics for this one. Well, to go along with that bluesy element to this, a little bit of a country vibe mixed in with the hard rock sounds, this does remind me of like a gunslinger kind of language. says there's a card up your sleeve and it's showing, so they're calling your bluff. And now that you need to keep going, you sure you've had enough? If they know they need to keep going, then they haven't had enough. They know that they need to keep going. They're not going to rest. I don't, man. But then it says, when they get you at close range, there's no need to discuss the roof, the river, revolver. It almost makes it seem as if the you, the second person in this tale, is some sort of wanted criminal. There's a bounty on their head. Maybe it's for cheating at cards at the local saloon. I don't know. But they're on the run and their life seems to be in danger. Could be anywhere. Could be a roof. Could be a river. Someone's got a revolver pointed at them. No. Says that it's getting darker, and beware because the dead will haunt you. They know where you've been. Says if you come out high and mighty, you will not appear. I don't know what that means. But then it says the roof, the river, revolver. So I don't know if the dead will haunt you is more of a literal thing or a figurative speech for the fact that the people that this person's killed literally haunts them, in their minds. Not like, ghosts literally, but it is, fatigue of seeing these people's faces as he's murdered them and stuff like that. Maybe he's a hired gun. I don't know. Maybe that's why he's got a bounty. The outro, though, is repeated over and over and over. You're dead and you know it. And it could just be this feeling that this other person has run out of luck or run out of time. They know they can't escape the law or the bounty hunters any longer. Every day they feel that their life is getting further and further out of their hands. It's becoming more chaotic and riskier to go anywhere, to get food, to find a place to sleep. You're dead and you know it. The roof, the river, revolver. Yeah, dude, that's catchy. Also, those lyrics made sense. There are a couple of lines, but all in all, I think that is the best lyrical dissection we've had all day. I'm on board for that. All right, Man of Fire. A lot of it is walking right here, but vocally this is rather poppy. Very straightforward beat on this one. Almost aimless on those ahs. Feels like we're slowing down. That's the second time when we've had guitar and drum only. Yeah. Rather disappointing penultimate track. I find this to be one of the weakest ones we've heard so far. Once again, though, the caveat here isn't that it's a bad track at all. It's just not as interesting as some of the other ones. The drum beat is kind of lock it in, just hit it on the beat over and over. The rest of the guitars and bass are pretty much doing that same exact thing, just really locking in. The getting this 4 on the floor thing going on. There's a little bit more guitar movement during the chorus, which is cool, but it's sort of lost within the core pulse too. The bass, I mean, the guitars are still emphasizing every downbeat, whatever note happens to be there, and that kind of defeats any sort of melodic flow that's going on. So now we have this beat just with changing pitches to it, which kind of loses that melodic quality. And then there's the post-chorus sections, which are drum and guitar, and I swear the drum slows down on both of them while the guitar keeps the beat, and it's this stretching of time. Like, it doesn't want to stretch anymore. You've pulled the rubber band to its extent, and it's just, it wants to snap back, and you're not letting it, and it's just this feeling of tension as these two instruments grow so far apart. Not far enough to destroy the song, but enough to make it noticeable. The drummer, stop dragging, get back on time. As usual, caveat, could be artistic representation. I don't know that though. It just sounds like the drummer can't keep up with the guitarist, and I don't read a narrative reason for this stretching of time. So I don't know. It happened both times, which makes me think it's intentional. But I don't know why it would be intentional. Maybe it's just one of those good old-fashioned Dozer moments. I don't know. The vocals, though, are incredibly poppy right from the start. The note choices are kind of pulling the chordal information in a very different direction than usual. What I mean by that is the key that you're in dictates what notes you are going to use to create the specific sound of the key. But chords are only going to play parts of those. So if your key is 7 notes, from octave to octave, you're gonna have 7 specific notes in there. Maybe your chord, though, only has 3. You got a triad going on, 3-note chord, which means the other 4 notes are open. The melody usually fills that in. It's why if you just play 4 sad chords, it doesn't really pull at your heartstrings, but if you put an evocative melody over that, it will, because the melody is molding those chords in order to extract more emotion out of them. So what we got here is that the guitar chords are still the typical hard rock, stoner rock stuff we've been listening to this entire time, but the vocals are poppier. Where they're filling in the space isn't so much grit anymore. They're not filling in with weight or heaviness or darkness. They're filling it in with brightness. It's a very interesting thing to do here. It works. Don't get me wrong, it's just unexpected, especially coming into the penultimate song of the album. This is where I would expect it to really be working towards wrapping up, which means we should be working towards a peak. And here they're still changing things up. It could absolutely pay off for them. We'll see how this final track goes. But I found it caught me off guard, I suppose, is the way to say that. The rest of the track is solid. The guitar solo is solid. The verse is solid. There's a lot of just hanging on to a specific area. They've been doing that. I'd say about a third of this album has just been hanging on to an idea rather than building riffs out of chords. The guitar solo was a little disappointing though. It ended as soon as it was getting good. I loved it. I was like, yeah, let's see where you take this. And we get through, well, like 8 bars. I'm like, dude, this is a good beginning or a good first half. You know, let's nail it in the back half, really send this off. And then we were back in the chorus. Dozer, how do you not know you were in the middle of a solo? That wasn't the end. Narratively, you had a lot more to go. You were pointing in this direction and you're like, actually, chorus time. Artistic differences, I suppose, between them and I. Lyrics. All right, tempted to just move on, but there's only 12 lines here. There's, as usual, the I narrator and the you other. The other is the man of fire. He sounds like ocean waves and takes you to the grave. He will cave you in. But it also says, may you have a pleasant growth. Safe and sound, but don't try to keep both. So you can be safe or sound, but not both. It says, because the man of fire is everywhere you turn. It says, you never belonged, tied and bound like you were lying under oath. It says, everywhere you turn's another lie, so lonely even though you kept your hand in mine. And I like this. It's full of nonsensical elements, but there speaks to be a relationship between these two, and they had each other's back for so long, and now the other is being hunted by the man of fire, which is probably a metaphor for death of some sort. Maybe the other person lives a rather reckless life, and our narrator simply can't keep them stable anymore. It's a tragic, lyrical track. Anyways, musically, it's still the poppiest one on here, which is a wild schism. For so long, I haven't been able to find any sort of thematic similarities between the music and the lyrics, and here that I do, it's an opposition of. So that's interesting. Let's wrap this up then. Big Sky Theory. This is 8.5 minutes long. I'm a little worried. I think their longer tracks are their weakest. They work best when they have concise ideas and execute them without fluff. I really hope that that concise writing shines through in this and that all 8.5 minutes are used wisely, but they haven't really shown that in the past. Let's dive in though. See how they wrap this album up. Okay, this is kind of doomy. I'll give them a longer runtime if they're going to go for a slow tempo. This feels dragging. The ride cymbal feels pushing. The reverb and delay sounds great at this part. I started conducting because I feel like the drummer's dragging again, and they are. Bringing the guitar part back. Yeah. I like that part. Now, maybe give them the benefit of the doubt, and the retardando is purposeful, but that entire section just continues to get slower. It's just, terrible. And I think if the guitar and vocals slowed down with it, that'd be one thing, but they keep on the old tempo. That was dark.
The truth has been a little bent. Your men will turn into machines. Is that the letter of intent? And still we march right into war, like serpents trying to feel the warmth. And soon it all will just implode. This nuclear storm will leave you cold. Sin will justify the means. The truth has been a little bent. Your men will turn into machines.
It's a largeness to this that I think works really well. A lot of it is a reverb on the vocals, but there's also a larger than life feeling from the guitars too. So the muted guitar and bass with the solo guitar. having very cool. I mean, I get it. That's the opening drum part. It's what kicked this entire song off. We're bookending the track that way, but if they had faded out that final section, y'all know how much I don't like fade outs. That would have been solid. I would have complained that it was a fade out instead of properly finished, but there's a hierarchy, right? Creative finale is like the best way to do it. Write a solid final part, unless, of course, you're thematically focusing on cycles, infinitum, anything like that, in which case the fade out is a solid thematic idea. But otherwise, even from a purely sonic perspective, the fade out it's fine. It's not my favorite. I don't like fade outs, but it's fine. It gets the job done. I'll complain about it, but it's fine. This was, what was this? I don't know, dude. We had that massive tempo drop. We have a massive reduction of layers into a drum part that it's cool. It was cool to start the track off with. I'm not saying it was a bad drum pattern, but it lacked energy. It lacked momentum. It lacked presence. And once again, it's slipping on the tempo, dude. It just doesn't have the oomph for the final thing you're going to hear in this 44 minutes of art. It just doesn't have that to conclude 40 minutes of music. I think that could have wrapped up any of these tracks. Maybe wouldn't have been great, but you still got another track after that to, get rid of that taste out of your mouth. But here you don't. This is the last thing you hear, and it's a cool idea. Like, I don't want to diminish that. The pattern itself is neat. Cool rhythmic things in it. Just sounds awesome. It's got a lot of flams in it. We got tom work in there. We got bass kicks. We got some syncopation. Like, it is cool. And then you have this constant reverb building around it. But it doesn't even commit to that. It just kind of stops as it almost hits like a clipping peak of too much reverb, to the point where maybe we could be doing something artistically with the texture of this. We quit before we get there, and then it just kind of fizzles out. It's a Dozer moment. I can see the vision to it. I just think there's a better way to have done this specific thing. Now, granted, in other cases, I've been able to say, I probably would have done this. It captures a similar vibe and similar idea, but a little more smoother or whatever. Here, I don't know how I would necessarily go about doing this, because honestly, I really do believe that the final section before the drum part is the outro. Like, that is such a good way to end an album. I would say just ditch it altogether. But I think there's a way that we could have transitioned from that into this reverberary drum thing and maybe keep some of the layers in there, but I don't really have my general constructive criticism here. All I can say is I didn't enjoy that part. I can tell you why I didn't enjoy it, but I don't have any perspective on how I would have fixed it or changed it, I think is the word I would prefer. Fixing implies there's something wrong with it, and it's just subjectively not my thing. This is a big track though. It's very doomy at the start. I enjoyed that. The tempo in here slows it down a little bit, brings us back to, was it Days of Future Past or Omega Glory? We had a really slow it was Fire from Fire Fell. No, it wasn't that. One of those tracks in the first 5 was slower. I can't for the life of me remember which one it was. But here we've kind of returned to that slower, more methodical pacing to this. Although the song doesn't ever want to commit to it, we have this feeling of slow and methodical, and then out of nowhere, the drummer will give us some little quicker syncopated ride stuff, and then we'll come back to the methodical and then to something more dexterous. And yeah, contrast, push and pull, squash and stretch, all of that applies, but here it feels in opposition of rather than in support of. Everything about this track is about dragging your feet. Every once in a while, throwing in something dexterous that pulls us forward feels off. It doesn't work in opposition of so much as it works. Okay, so like when it works in opposition, when I say that, it is an opposing idea that supports the themes. This isn't working, though it is in opposition. It is more of a destructive opposition than a collaborative opposition. And I never felt like those moments worked well to create a positive clashing, to tell the story through the contrast. But we do have this heavy pulse, slower cadence, heavy guitars. We got the vocals in here, lots of reverb on them, but also a lot of lower layered sections too. Just a guitar, a muted bass, light drum work, light guitars. And we'll contrast that with these big moments and then bring it down and hit the big moments. I like that. Really good pacing throughout this track for 8 minutes of a slower tempo song. It really didn't feel like it was getting too long until like 6 minutes in, which is pretty good because at that point we had already done the verse chorus bridge verse chorus thing. We had gotten through a lot of this track and it really hadn't reached the point of sameness until we kind of went towards the end. And the progression started to slow down as we built the final atmosphere. So I'll give them, they kept it fresh for a lot longer than I think most bands would have been able to. There is one big issue here though. It is the drums, man. The guitar actually at one point, but there's just too much temporal slipping here. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt because it is, like in some other tracks, incredibly consistent. Every time we come to these lighter sections, somebody is playing too slow. Although in one case, the drummer did play too fast. It was during a snare roll and they got excited and sped up. I've heard it before. It's something that happens every level of drummer. Well, almost every level. I'm sure there's a point when you just really lock in. There's definitely some fantastic drummers out there that are just like human metronomes. But for most of us who aren't drum gods, there's going to be performances where you get excited, you speed up. I'm sure you've been to a concert where the song was played 5-10 BPMs faster than it was on the studio. You're like, dang, this is a faster version. Yeah, the drummer just counted it quicker. Maybe it was an accident, maybe it was on purpose. It happens. You don't really worry about it too much. But yeah, Yeah, the slow sections, somebody who's dragging almost every time. The drummer sped up a couple of times on snare fills. They're just not super comfortable at this speed. And there is another side to this though, especially if you're a Doom fan. The temporal slippage or the looseness of tempo is a feature, not an issue. I, as I've said before, I've been raised on playing orchestral music. And in that, you have the conductor, he tells everyone to play. You gotta be in time on everything. There's the occasional free section where you actually have freedom to play a little slower or faster, especially if you're a soloist. But for the most part, you lock in. And so, much like intonation, it's another thing. If you're slightly out of tune, that is a massive problem. You get your instrument in check, or you don't come to class, you don't come to rehearsal the next day, or class the next day, or whatever. Like, don't disrupt the performance. That's a huge thing. You have such a huge weight on your shoulders to be in time, to be in tune, to work as a unit with your entire band. And I think that's one of the reasons why intonation is a really big thing for me, why I'm not a big fan of dissonance. It sounds like instruments are out of tune to me. That's how I've been trained. I have decades of, this being hammered home that, dude, just tune your instrument. Obviously, they're doing it intentionally to create this microtonal dissonance or, the dissonant tech death and stuff like that, dissonant black metal. And the same thing is for this. Some people really love the looseness of time, especially in genres like doom metal, but in rock in general. The imperfections really speak to people. For me, though, if you're slipping, you're a problem, and you're the reason we have to go back to chapter marker, to bar 16 or something and start over again. We were doing fine, and then tuba started slipping. You're playing too slow. Keep it up. All right, that kind of thing. And that's all I can hear here with this dissonance, this slipping of time. Some instruments are in what I'm feeling is still the time feel, still the tempo, and then one instrument is just dragging, just a hair bit behind everyone else, and it sounds bad. It sounds amateur. It could be intentional. Some of y'all may have enjoyed it. I didn't. I'm not a fan of that at all. Maybe one day I will be. I said I wasn't going to be a fan of black metal. Album of the year list, I had 3 of them in there. So, it can happen. But I'm not thinking so. This is one of those things that's just ingrained in me from my formative years. Otherwise, though, I don't know why I decided to do that for like 10 minutes. The outro is great. We bring back some of the earlier guitar lines. We have this new atmospheric line. I don't know if it's another guitar or maybe a synth of some sort, but it's 3 notes, a lower, a higher, a mid. And then we bring that up like half of an octave or so, and we do it again, a lower, a higher, and a mid. And then we kind of bounce between these 2 groups of notes. And then we have that going on alongside the guitar lick, alongside the bass line, alongside this drummer that's going crazy once again. Like, this is a big moment. Personally, I think it went on just a little too long, but that's just me always craving contrast. I think as far as the idea of crafting an idea like this and just dwelling within it, I mean, I've had this conversation in the past with lots of y'all, even with bands like Opeth, where I will say, well, that idea was really drug out. And y'all are like, nah, dude, I love that. I could have listened to it for twice as long. Yeah, I mean, we all have our own likes within art and music. So it's possible you really enjoyed this ending too. I liked it though. Solid idea. And I think that's why I really wanted it to end on that too. It is big. It is epic. It feels conclusive. Even if they didn't do a fade out and just kind of hold the last note and allow that to naturally taper off to a silence rather than fading out the entirety just as it keeps playing, that would have worked too. That was definitive and final. It felt like a culmination of everything they have been doing. it had the sick riffs, it had the cool layering, it had the harmonies, it had the wild, frantic drum work, and it was all mixed and balanced in a way that was complementary to each other. I've had so many sections in here where I was like, okay, all these layers are neat. I'm glad they tried to smash them together, but get kind of cluttered. Could have used a little bit more tweaking in some of these places, but this was perfect. And I think that's why it hurts so much that they didn't end with it and went to something that completely pushed me away and pulled me out of the experience. Let me hit some lyrics. I don't know what the lyrics are saying. There is an idea of war that's brought up multiple times throughout. The final two stanzas say, the ends won't justify the means, the truth has been a little bent, your men will turn into machines, is that the letter of intent? And still we march right into war like serpents trying to feel the warmth, and soon it will just implode, the nuclear storm will leave you cold. So, much like we saw Until Man Exists No More, we have a focus here on the destructive powers of humanity and how we are likely to go to war and absolutely wipe each other out. And that no matter what the end result is, it cannot justify what happens during these wars. Win or lose, these wars are terrible events. Those 8 lines make sense. Grammar's a little rough, but it makes sense. I don't get the rest of this. Say it once today. Let the weight drop dead. I should wonder why. Don't dare. Let your grief away. Well, I could invite you all in this war. Arms raised, arms control, a waste, just a wreck, no spare, let it fold. So refuse to die. Broken clouds, the end is nigh. We could invite you all in this war. That's just gibberish to me. Some fleeting ideas there of a you who is in opposition to the ideas of the narrator. I don't really know what the friction is, but they're not seeing eye to eye. And the narrator says, well, we could just go to war about it. And then the last 8 lines condemn war. Once again, I'm getting really conflicting messaging here. But the idea is about war, and I'd say that the end of this track is pretty epic and bombastic. It is heavy and weighty. I feel like it takes itself very seriously. It's an incredible finale that does, in a sense, create a sonic representation of a battle and the heaviness, weight, and magnitude of that. And so I think that may be why we have the drum thing at the end as it is. Maybe a solo person on the field. It kind of has a little bit of a marching drum thing going on there too. So maybe they're trying to channel that in there. It still just doesn't click for me. This was an interesting album though, full of highs and lows, eclectic choices, sticking rigidly to a recipe at other times, confusing me in some places. But overall, I think I had fun with it. Granted, I had my criticisms through here, but I had a smile on my face just as often, and I'm walking away from it, possibly considering another listen. That's a pretty big bit of praise from me at this beginning, saying I'd probably never check this out again. It kind of turned around on me. It is a fun album. Confusing, but fun. I'm glad I got to check this out. I am still quite intrigued about their follow-up album, or maybe even the one that came after that, to kind of see their growth. That's what I'm really interested in with Dozer. But these are just my thoughts. What are yours? Did you enjoy this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? If I misspoke about something, do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on any of these tracks, the album as a whole, or the lyrics? Add all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here, you can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I'd greatly appreciate all 3 of those. I'll see y'all tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. UTC. We got a live stream going on. It's like 2.5 hours long. We're going to look at 12 songs in total. We just hang out, chill, chit chat, check out some music. It is incredibly relaxed. The community is excellent. I highly suggest it if you can. Make your way out to that. It is always a blast. That happens every Sunday, by the way, at the same time. Otherwise, as usual, Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. I'll be back on with the usual reactions. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.